Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to be placing our UI in the world so that you can see the buttons are down here, the main grid is up here. These are just some placeholders for now, but we're going to be, as you can see, there is some depth going on here. If I move my head from side to side, you'll see it much more clearly when you build it yourself. But let's have a look in the editor as well. You can see that there is a depth, and we're going to be setting it up with guidelines to help us position things correctly and scale things properly, which can actually be quite hard when converting between all the different units that we are using. We're going to figure all of that out in this lecture. Let's dive in. Okay, so we've designed our 2D UI, but we know that VR UI has got depth. How do we translate this depth into our editor? Well, what we do is we split up these different components that act at different depths. In fact, let's have a look at the sticker sheet and see that there is this side view guy here. This side view shows us the different components, basically one main UI bit and then the controls underneath. What we can do is we can split this into two Unreal widgets. So we're going to create one for the back pane, one for the buttons. Let's go ahead and do that. Create some placeholder widgets, not the ones that actually have the full UI in just yet. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and add some folder for the UI. And in the UI, I'm going to add a folder for this particular UI that we're creating, which is going to be the painting picker. Let's open up the painting picker and add in some placeholder widgets. So I'm going to go to add new user interface widget blueprint, and I'm going to add the WBP prefix underscore painting grid. Okay, let's open up the painting grid, and it's going to be super simple. What I'm going to do is just make this a widget with a white image. So I'm going to delete the canvas panel and add from the palette the image component or the image widget. And now what we'll see is if we set this to custom scaling mode, which we can do by hitting where it currently says fill screen to custom, then you'll see that whatever size I set this, when I place it in the world, it's going to be white in its entirety. So we can see easily what size the widget is. So I'm going to close that widget down now that we've created a nice placeholder. And we're going to want to do this in our main menu map. So let's open up the main menu map. Then we can go back to our UI folder. And in here, I'm going to create a blueprint that will hold our widgets in their correct configuration, their correct placement, so that we can display the widget in the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new blueprint class, an actor, prefix of BP underscore, and I'm going to call it the painting picker because it will in its entirety be the painting picker UI. So what I can do is I can put this blueprint in the world. I'm going to place it at 0, 0. Also going to put a spawn point in the world and place that at 0, 0, 2, so that when we play, we will be at the 0, 0 point. That means that our BP painting picker has to have its UI laid out, assuming that its root is actually where the eye is going to be. So this little root ball is going to be where our eye goes. So selecting our scene root, let's go add a components, go and look for widget, and we're going to call it painting grid because that's the widget we're going to put there. Then selecting the painting grid components, we can go to the details pane, user interface, widget class, and then you can select the WBP painting grid as the widget, and that pops up into the world. There we go. We've got ourselves a widget. Now there will be a slight issue because if I move this back so that our eye is here, the widget is here, go ahead and preview in VR, you aren't going to see a widget because actually you have to turn your head around because it's behind you. So what we've got to do is actually flip our widget around 180 degrees around the Z axis, so 180 in Z, basically turns it round, and we can put it on the other side of our eye, the center of the view, and you can see that the widget is there. Absolutely massive, but it's there. Don't worry, we'll sort out the scaling in a bit. Now we've rather haphazardly placed this widget. As it happens, it's about 2.4 meters away from the eye, so it's almost, just by accident, the right distance by this view side. Now, how do we make it exactly this distance? How do we place things that accurately and make it 6 degrees down and so on and so forth? Well, I've got a little bit of a trick for you. What we're going to do is select our default scene route, and we're going to go to Add Components, add a spline component, not spline mesh, but a spline. Now select the rightmost element of the spline. It usually puts 2 in by default, so the rightmost element I want to put 2.5 meters away from the left element. So we go to the selected points, position is currently at 1 meter, we'll put it at 2.5 meters in X, and that means that, there you go, we've got ourselves a nice 2.5 meter ruler essentially. And selecting the spline, I can rotate it by 6 degrees down around the y-axis. If I go up to the top of the details pane in the transform, find the y rotation and do -6 degrees, then boom, it has rotated down by 6 degrees, and that's exactly what we want it to be for our side view. Now to get our side view in Unreal, unfortunately we have to go to the front view, which is really strange. I don't quite know why. It sounds like there's a difference of conventions somewhere in the editor. Now if we select our painting grid, it seems to be almost located at the right location. No, it's not. Select our painting grid, it was still selecting the spline for some reason. And what we want to do is move it as carefully and as accurately as we can, but by eye, to the end of our spline. It's all right if it's just kind of 1 or 2 centimeters off. Remember, you can change your snap sizes if you need to get it more fine detailed. And that will have, basically, if we go back to our perspective view, placed our UI in the right place, which is good. But if you preview, you'll still notice that it's absolutely huge because we've got our scale completely to pot. How do we get the scale correct? Well, if we have a look again at selecting our painting grid widget and scroll on down the details pane to the user interface section, you can see there's this draw size section, and it's currently saying 500 by 500. Now, in world units, in centimeters, this is 5 meters. That's a lot. But it actually also directly translates to the size inside the widget. So it's 500 by 500 pixels, which isn't that much if we think about it. So what we have to do is actually create a scale that's going to work for us, because if I want to make the size of widget in dims, for example, so I'm going to go to the painting picker, look at the size of our card layout, and you can see that it's 848 by 560. So if I put that in, 848 by 560, that now means we've got 1 pixel for every dim. And that's probably a bit small. It'll be a bit low resolution, but we'll sort that out when we've actually got some UI in there. So we've got 848 by 560. Obviously, this is too large. This is not a dim, because at 1 meter away, we're saying that basically one of these units is 1 centimeter, not a millimeter as a dim should be. So actually, we're off by a factor of 10. What we have to do is, if this was a meter away, we'd need to divide by 10. So we can do this very easily. If we go to our scale and do 1 divided by 10, then you get 0.1, and that can be the scale across the board. Okay. Now, if you go ahead and play, you'll see that this is too small. Why is it too small? Because we're forgetting that we aren't 1 meter away. We're actually 2.5 meters away. And if you remember scaling a dim, if we go and have a look at our sticker sheet, a dim has to be scaled by the distance away that we are. So at 1 meter, something that is 400 millimeters wide, at 2.5 meters needs to be 1,000 millimeters wide, basically 2.5 times. So the way we can do this is go to the scale again and basically just multiply with the asterisk by 2.5. So multiplying by the asterisk by 2.5 and copying that into the other scales, you are going to get something more correct. Go ahead and hit play. There we go. We've got something that is basically the right size. That is how you set up your scale and your depth for VR from the dim measurements that we had. So the buttons are now going to be your challenge to place. So place the buttons. Check out the design guidelines for how far and how far down they should be. Place the buttons exactly, make sure they are rotated, because unlike the back pane, we are going to rotate the buttons. Have a look at the side view in the design guidelines to see. Make this the right scale. So have a look at your buttons in your UI design. How big are they for basically just drawing a box around them, and try and make them the right size and scale, and think about the dims, so how close they are to your eyes, so that is all correct. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So we have got a basic widget here. I'm going to go ahead and add another widget into our painting picker, and I'm going to call this the buttons. And I'm actually going to use the same widget class for now, because we don't need another one. It's just going to be a white rectangle. I'm going to need to spin it 180 degrees, as we've done before. And I'm going to need to scale it, give it the right size in dims. Basically, how many dims or pixels is it going to be? So let's go to our painting picker, have a look at our add and delete button. In fact, I'm going to group them to make it easier to see the dimensions. So right click and group selection, and I'm going to call the group buttons. Now I can see that the size is going to be 207 by 996. So can do this X 207 by 96 in Y. That's going to give us the right sort of size for the buttons, but obviously the scale is completely to pot. What we're going to have to do is scale it down. But first of all, I'm going to do the positioning. Let's go for a front view. I'm going to create a new ruler, so I'm going to copy and paste my spline. And this time I'm going to make it how many meters long? Let's have a look. Go to the sticker sheet. Have a look at our side view. Okay, it's 2.25, so 225 centimeters. So I'm going to go to the second point in my spline and make it 225 in position. That's great. And then what's the rotation down going to be? It's minus 27 degrees. So selecting the spline, it's currently minus 6 degrees. Let's make it minus 27 degrees. That's brought it down quite considerably. Now selecting our buttons, where are they? They're in the center of the world. We're going to move them down roughly to the right location, just by eye really, along our ruler. And you'll notice that they are facing directly forward. If we went into perspective mode, you can see that they're facing directly forward, not towards the user's eye, as is indicated in the guidelines that they are rotated towards the user's eye. So what we've got to do here is rotate those two. Let's see, do we rotate them by 27 degrees? Yes, we do. Rotated by 27 degrees, they're facing towards the user's eye, but clearly much, much, much too large. So next up, we've got to think about scaling. Now remember, the first thing is it's got to be divided by 10, because we're going from centimeters to millimeters. But also we've got to think about how far away we are. We are 2.25 meters away. So it's 2.25 divided by 10 is going to be the scale that we want. And then we can take that scale and apply it to the Z and Y scales as well. And what you can see is that we've got some buttons that are looking much more the right sort of scale. If I go ahead and hit play and we have a look, you can see that basically what we've got is something that looks an awful lot like our design. So now we can split up the elements of our design and put them into those widgets, and the scale and positioning is correct and ergonomic. So congratulations, you've learnt how to place and scale UI elements for VR ergonomically in Unreal. Big pats on the back, and I'll see you in the next lecture.